Wait, I'm not ready. Just kidding. Well, it looks like it says we're streaming on YouTube, so I'm going to trust it and say, hey, everybody, welcome to The Baptist
And the Buddhist.
with Mark,
And Brian.
and we are on season 2, episode 6, I do believe. Can't
I
believe
don't
we're
believe that.
this far into season 2 already. Man, last episode was a whirlwind. No pun intended. Just kidding. It was a really far stretch. And we just couldn't stop there. So we had to go on. We have to have a part 2, basically, but it's
It
going to
is
get a
pretty
little
much
more
part two.
in detail. Um, thank you all for those that have reached out to us. I have a couple comments that fit perfectly in this episode. So it's going to be great. But with through those channels of communication that are being communicated to us, you can do the same too. Make sure to hit us up. Instagram, we almost have 100 followers already. It's up to like 94, 95-ish. So thank
Wow.
you guys for following us on Instagram. I don't know what you're thinking there, but hit us up on the rest of the places too, like the places where you can actually find our audio and videos. You can hit us up at YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. We're on the Twitter.
Twitter.
You can find us on like TikTok and Reddit, but you can find us
There's
everywhere.
not much going
YouTube.
on there
I
yet.
already said YouTube. Um, but definitely all the podcast apps out there as well. Um, find us there. Give us
And you
a,
can also email at
yeah,
baptistandbuddhist@gmail.com.
yeah, exactly. Baptist and Buddhist at gmail.com. Give us reviews, good or bad. We don't really care. We want to know what you guys think, first of all. So, I mean, we've
They
had
spend too much time talking. I don't know. Like,
it's a
do that.
podcast.
Oh, yeah.
What do you expect? Juggling?
Well, now that you mention it.
Contact juggling. There we go. I forgot. I think that was just subliminally in my mind, like, oh yeah, he was contact juggling before the show started. So
Never during the show. We don't want it to be that fun.
no, definitely not. We want to be serious. So
Very
serious.
serious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're gonna. Last time we kind of started almost backwards of what I wanted to do, but like it worked really well. Um, last time we talked about all the fun UFO and ghosts, aliens, and supernatural stuff. And there's just so much that you can pack into that topic. And for me, on my side at least, it kind of overflows to this topic, which would be more of an introductory topic to the topic. Do you know what topic? We're talking about the spiritual realm and yes, the spiritual realm and uh, or the angelic realm or whatever you want to call it, that spiritual realm, whatever that looks like, and we're going to talk about that.
This is gonna be a fascinating episode because there are gonna be so many diametrically opposed views in this episode. I mean, I guess that goes to say, that's how most of the podcast goes, but
Yeah, I mean, we could. How about we debate? Just kidding. We don't want to make this a debate, guys. We do a discussion, which probably makes you more bored than you should be, but um, that's
yeah,
what it is. We're not gonna debate it. Maybe
we would
one
get
day.
so
Just
many
kidding.
more views if we debated.
Let's have like really weird like screen names, and then like we could start yelling. I'll be like Nephilim Funk or something like that. Like
Are you?
this sounds like something that would be on like modern day debate or something.
There is
There
someone I
is a
think on.
Nephilim guy. Yeah,
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
No shade thrown to Nephilim
No, definitely
free.
not. Come on our podcast. We'd love to have you. Baptismbuddhist at gmail.com. So,
good or bad reviews.
Yeah. We also take good or bad fan mail as well, or not fan mail, non-fan mail, um,
Whatever the opposite
hate
of
mail. That's what
fan
it's called.
is.
It's
Yeah.
hate mail. That's what it is. They're haters. So, like, I wanted to start this topic off. Like, I don't know if I should start with the spiritual realm or go right into like the angelic beings of the realm. I guess I'll start with the realm because that's kind of what we're looking at.
Yeah.
But a lot of it's going to focus on who's in that realm and what's happening, and a lot of descriptions and stuff too. So when we talk about the spiritual realm in Christianity, according to the Bible, um, from my perspective, from my paradigm, that spiritual realm is a very real realm. It can be tactile, it can be seen, it can be experienced, and it can be uh, it's a place you can be in. But according to the Bible, and I'm not going to do a ton of like digging into the Bible and uh, like referring because I have a ton of notes on this topic, and I'm gonna try really hard to slim it all down. But uh, uh, in the Bible, you see that the spiritual realm is one that can be hidden from humans, from our eyes, and it can be revealed to our eyes as well. And it can be visited by mankind, or at least seen by mankind. Um, and we went through when we looked at cosmology, we saw that there was the third heaven, which is like the realm that God dwells in, and it's a real place outside of the universe, outside of this. If the universe was a bubble, it's like outside of the bubble, and like very real. Uh, there's an actual border. There's something in between the second heaven, the universe, and the third heaven, the universe. But there's also uh, uh, almost a dimensional aspect of being able to go in between heavens and exist on the same plane but in a different dimension almost. And there's a Bible verse that talks about it. It lists four dimensions, and I that kind of clues me into like the extra dimensional quality of the heavenly realm, or the spiritual realm, if you will. Um, I don't see it as some esoteric, like there are just glowing beings floating around like aimlessly uh, that you can't really comprehend. The Bible says that things in heaven are a shadow of things on earth. It says you can understand the heavenly things by what you can see. So if I cast my shadow, I can understand the shape of my hand on a two-dimensional plane. I can understand that my fingers move. I can even sometimes sense a depth with my shadow. Like, oh yeah, that's closer, that's further. So I can understand my hand is there, but when I actually look at my hand, it's so much more real, and there's so much more detail than the shadow has ever shown me before. And that's because I can see it in three dimensions. So I kind of attribute that quality to this heavenly realm. And there are things that we would recognize. There's I'll list off some things that the Bible mentions, and we should be able to recognize them if we were to be transported to the third heaven right now. We would be able to see what, like, oh yeah, that's a mountain, that's a building. It's not going to be like some weird thing like, oh, I've never seen this before. Uh, but maybe in so much more detail, or in a way that we've never experienced it before, a much more pure sense of reality and of existence. And I think what we are experiencing in a three-dimensional world, limited to what mankind can experience, it's it's that much more real. It's much more real than what we're experiencing now. So I mean, what else can I say about this that is not going to take hours? um, well, I'm gonna jump into the angels because the Bible talks about like this heavenly realm, sure, but what do who's there now? We see there are these angelic beings, and I'm going to use the word angels as an umbrella term, even though there are more specifics, and I'll get into it a little bit more. But these angels, the angelic beings, dwell in this heavenly dimension, if you will, and they're well. Let me start with some misconceptions of angels, because you say angels, and people always say, "Oh,
Oh.
yeah, exactly."
Wings, white robes, halos, usually white, blonde, curly haired,
Yeah,
and sometimes babies too.
yeah, exactly. Yep. So misconceptions of angels. I wrote these notes I've had for years, um, and I've added things here and there over the years. But common misconceptions of angels: they have halos. I mean, there's probably not a ring of metal floating above their heads. um, they're actually, the
Never know.
Bible describes them, their skin, as glowing embers going back and forth through their skin. So almost like looking at a burning log and seeing the energy of the flame and heat going through it. That's what I imagine. Like, so it's like kind of like a heat coursing, or a fire coursing through their skin. Some of the angelic beings are described that way. Um, Another misconception is that they're cute little babies. Maybe they shoot arrows. They might have bows and arrows. We know they have swords, but they're definitely not cute little babies. Um, those would be terrifying babies. Um, Angels have wings. Well, some angelic beings do, and we'll get into that. But most angels, like the lower echelon of angels, do not have wings. Um, some people describe angels as women. We never see evidence that there are women angels, and the Bible actually says that there's no marriage in heaven, um, regarding like the angelic beings, and maybe that has something to do with that. But we never see evidence that there are, like, quote unquote female angels. Um, and I'll get into that a little bit more. A misconception is that angels are always good. We've seen in the last season and a half that I've always mentioned some fallen angels of some sort. Lucifer. Um, Misconceptions. This one, I've been confronted with people like, they just, they're just talking. It's not confrontation. They're just talking. And somehow they think this is what the Bible talks about, is that a good person becomes an angel when they die. No, that's not right. And also a misconception, though it could be applicable in other ages, but they are watching over and protecting me. Yes and no. And we'll get into that a little bit more. I have a whole history of angels. We know they were there when God formed the earth, because they celebrated and cheered. Um, they rejoiced at the formation of the earth, the creation of the earth. So we know Genesis 1:1 talks about, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, but we know the angels were existing before the earth was made sometime. Um, the morning stars were there when he laid the foundation of the earth. That's Job 38. Um, let's see, I'm going to skip a bunch of these notes. We know they were judged at one point in history because of Lucifer's rebellion. Um, man, there's so much we could talk about, um, in that. In Lucifer's plan, we talked about that previously. He rebelled against God. He pitted his will against God's will. And yeah, here's one thing about that heavenly realm. It's like I said, it's real. It's not just like people, like these angels floating around. They actually have like specific purposes. They're doing things. They have like specific duties and jobs. And there's a government in the heavenly realm. There's principalities, powers, mights, dominions, thrones, not only on earth but in the heavenly realm as well. So we see there's some kind of like, I don't know if I want to say hierarchy. We'll see some of that, but there are definitely different rules. Different rulers or different positions over certain things, and we'll see some of this in what's mainly described as like princes. Like we know Satan is the prince of the power of the air, the prince of the world, this world. He has dominion in some form or fashion over the air, so like the second heavens and the air of the earth and the world itself. The world, the Bible usually talks about worlds as being the system that's on the earth. So whether it be an angelic world on the earth, like in times past, or a humanly world on the earth now, and there's going to be a new world on the earth in the future. Um, but so there's all these different levels and complexity to this government of the heavenly realm. And obviously there's angelic wills being pitted against God's will, and so there's a conflict. There's been a conflict, and there probably is a conflict still between angels um, and the good and the bad, if you will. At one point, mm, I've heard this. I've heard this be described when hell was created. God created hell. The Bible says it was created for the devil and his angels. So it, it was specifically created, purpose for Satan and his angels. Maybe that stopped the rebellion in its tracks, and that's why there might not be any more rebellion going on. Um, who knows? But that so there's definitely a good and a bad to this heavenly realm now. So we see the angels. We might have an idea of when they were made, and the rebellion and everything. Um, and who are the angels? As we've seen, they are created beings by God. So God created them. He calls them the sons of God. And the Bible, whenever it talks about a son of God, it's really direct. It's really describing a direct creation from God. So the angels, Jesus Christ himself, the nation Israel as his chosen nation, is described as being a son of God, and the body of Christ, the church in this age, is described as being the son of God. So like direct creations out of his will, basically. So is there a number of angels in the Bible? I think the book of Daniel gives us like 100 million, but the Bible also says, and that was just at one point in one location, 100 million angels. But the Bible says that they're innumerable. There's so many that you can't put a real number on it because there are so many out there. Um, and let's see here. So in this heavenly realm, we see these angelic beings. We see things that are recognizable in heaven. We see windows and doors and horses and chariots. But how are the angels described? We know that they probably can eat because we see reference about angels' food in like the book of the Psalms.
Cake. It's cake, right?
Yeah, angel food, cake, exactly. Which I mean, I think when it refers to angel food in one spot, it's referring to the manna from heaven, which has a very disturbing origin. If you look into it, it's actually one of the heads of one of the seven heads of the dragon that's broken, that's smitten, and it's broken for food for Israel in the tribulation at least. So we kind of can refer that back. Oh, that manna from heaven came from one of the seven heads of the beast or of the dragon, in in the heavenlies that was smitten, and it was broken down, and that would come that would be like a daily sustenance for Israel in the wilderness. But I digress. Um, we see the angels being described a lot as flaming fire, or even ministers of flaming fire. They're always described as having light or even lightning in some cases. Um, they're usually we can we can safely assume that if you're confronted with one, you're going to be kind of scared, frightened, and most of the time when they show up to someone, they say, "Fear not." It's like, well, hold on a second,
Be
fear,
not
like
afraid.
don't worry, yeah, be not afraid. Um, what do they look like? Why are they so scary? Well, in a lot of cases in biblical accounts, they appear just as a man would. They they're they probably don't have flesh and bones like humans do, and the Bible says that they're spirits, but they can take physical manifestation. We see in Old Testament accounts that angels would appear to certain people, and they would describe them as men, but we know they're angels from the text. And whenever the angels do appear as like a humanoid or a man, like a human figure, it's always described as a man. Um, they are described as like the man of God, men in white apparel. So maybe the white robes aren't a uh, maybe it's not such a misconception. A lot of times you'll see angelic beings or stuff like that wearing like linen robes, like white linen robes. Sometimes they're described as having shining garments. I do remember when Moses came down from the mountain with the tablets, his face shined like an angel. It's like, oh, okay. So like maybe they have a shining appearance to them. Uh, they once it was described as a young man with long white garments. In Revelation, it kind of gives you a size, like what their relative size is, and it's basically like the size of a man. And even in the tribulation, the book of Hebrews describes them as being strangers, angels unaware. Like you won't really be able to know if they're an angel or not in some cases. And even Gabriel, the one of the archangels, is described as the man Gabriel. So uh, there's always that that man like quality to them. And then in Matthew it talks about there being no marriage in heaven, and basically talking about like we can kind of refer uh that there's no like procreation in heaven, and we'll get into that a little bit. But they're all we assume that they're all male like, or male like a male. So in a lot of passages we see them, we see horses and chariots. I believe when they appeared on the mountainside in, I think it was like in one of the books of the Kings or something, that they had horses and chariots. So it's they have tools, and they have animals, even heavenly animals as well, which is an interesting topic. We'll do an episode on animals one of these days.
Yeah, I mean, angel horses and then dragons earlier, like
Yeah, and
very
there, I mean,
interesting.
we can know who that dragon is too. Um, but uh, I'm going to get into some of the classifications of angels really quick. We know they have personalities. They don't have. I don't think they would have the qualities of a man, as in our soul, in the way we think and our emotion and everything. But we know that angels have a will because Lucifer pitted his will against them. We know that they have desires and lusts. They have a mind to think, and they even have emotion because Satan has wrath. He has emotion. against God, really. That's where his wrath is. But they also have power. Uh, Peter tells us that they're greater in power, and that the angels don't rail against Christ, and they have some kind of authority. But and you even see Jesus was made lower than the angels. So there's kind of like a power hierarchy. Like, okay, there's man, there's Jesus, there's like Jesus the man, there's angels, and then obviously there would be God. And Jesus the man didn't have the abilities or the nature of angels, but he did have the nature of God still. And that's uh, that great strange relationship of the fully man and fully God. Um, Man, where else can I go with this? We even see,
Classifications of angels.
yeah, yep, that's where I'm going next. But also regarding their power, you see like one angel at one point kills 185,000 people, and like he probably didn't even have to wipe sweat off his brow. Um, and even in Revelation, and you see one angel standing in the sun, like it doesn't affect them at all. So some have powers over certain things, some have powers over regions, and we'll look at that a little bit. Classifications of angels. There's a lot of different classifications. The most famous ones are the cherubim. Those are the floating babies. Just kidding. They are four-faced beasts that would probably give you nightmares. Uh, um, the first cherub you see in the Bible is when Adam and Eve are kicked out of the garden. They came down with a flaming sword, and there were cherubim on each side. Cherubim means cherubs. Im is the plural in a Hebrew sense. Um, so cherubim, cherub, or cherubs, same thing. Um, Cherubim are just a really interesting topic when you look at when Israel was commanded to make the Ark of the Covenant. They were to put two cherubim on each side, and I've seen recreations of the Ark of the Covenant. I've even seen the recreation that Israel, the Temple Institute in Israel, would use if the temple would be set up again. They have the Ark of the Covenant. I don't think it's biblically accurate because it was just like two angels with wings and not actual cherubim. But I've seen also other iterations and representations with cherubim with the four faces on and everything. So, um, and they, on the Ark of the Covenant, there were the two cherubim that would sit on each side of where the glory of God would dwell in within the Holy of Holies. And in the heavenly realm, you see there are four cherubim standing around the throne of God, and they have their wings outstretched. And at one point, uh, Lucifer was the cherub that covereth. He covered the top.
Hmm.
I think maybe, I don't know if I'm remembering this correctly, but cherub might be mean to guard. I'm not sure exactly on that, but you also see, we talked about last time, the UFO. You see them acting as kind of like the transportation of God as well. Um, there's one interesting thing, like what does a cherub look like? Because in some passages, it talks about the face of a cherub. So cherubim have a face of a man, a lion, an eagle, and a bull or a calf. Um, but other passages says man, lion, eagle, and a cherub, the face of a cherub. It's like, okay, like, does that mean cherub alone looks like has the face of a calf, like a bull? And when you look into that, it's really interesting because you'll see, um, even they're described as having the feet of a calf, the feet of calf. The cherubim are described that way. And when you look at that, the quality of having the face of a calf, you see references to calves and bulls, like when Israel made a golden calf while Moses was on the mount. oh, why would they do that? And it's like, oh, whoa, this thing just popped out of the fire. Like, I think they were just playing dumb, like, oh yeah, we built it. Sorry, Moses. Oh, it just came out of the fire for some reason. Um, how strange. But I mean, you would like, where did they get that idea of a calf? It might have something to do with Lucifer because he was a cherub, or he is a cherub. And what would his face look like? Maybe it was that of a calf. Um, I mean, you even see references to angelic beings called the bulls of Bashan, or Bashan, however you want to pronounce it. And prophetically, they were basically railing against the Messiah when he was on the cross. The bulls of Bashan on every side of him. Um, so there might be something to that. Maybe not, but it's interesting to see that represented as a calf. Um, and you see, there it sounds like there are classifications of like a high cherub, as Lucifer would be described as the covering cherub. You also see the seraphim, which you don't see a whole lot of reference to them. They're in Isaiah and in Revelation. They have six wings. I think these are the ones um, that are uh, well, I don't remember exactly what they were doing around the throne. I would have to look into that a little more. But there's that other classification of seraphim versus cherubim. And I think, as we see, those are like the two highest ranking order of the angelic realm, the angelic beings. You see archangels as well. We have two named archangels in the Bible, and that's Michael. He's usually described uh, as the warrior archangel. And there's some really interesting passages about Michael the archangel and how he is like, at one point Satan and Michael were kind of battling over the body of Moses when he died. And it's like, why would Satan want his body? And you might look at it as like maybe that he wanted to use or to prevent him from coming back, because in the Revelation, Moses and Elijah do come back as the two witnesses. Um, but Michael, he's the war archangel. Um, you even see, I think I don't remember where it was at. It might be in Daniel, but he at one point he was called forth, like he was supposed to go help Daniel, I think it was. And he showed up to Daniel and was like, sorry, I was withheld by the prince of I forgot what, Syria or something like that. I was withheld by that prince for like several days. So it kind of sounds like maybe there was a an angelic prince that's over this rule on the earth for Syria or whatever it was, and through angelic battle somehow it's like power versus power, and one has to overcome the other somehow in some capacity. Not necessarily kills one another, because they can't die, and you'll see that they can inherit death though. um, I'm just going to go through this real quick. There's also Gabriel, the mighty one of God. We usually see him as a messenger archangel. He shows up to Daniel, and it might have even been Daniel that was withheld by the prince, not Michael. I would have to look into that again, but he does show up in Daniel as well, and he shows up to Mary, the mother of Jesus, and delivers that message, that Jesus is going to be born and stuff like that. So we see him as a messenger, um, and those are the two named archangels that we know of. There are extra biblical texts that name others. We're not sure 100% if they are angels or not, but
Those would be like, uh,
I think of like Uriel,
yeah,
I think
Uriel
was
was the one
one.
that came to mind.
Yeah, that's the only one I can ever remember. I don't know why. Uh, And uh, Lucifer, obviously, that's one of the other named angels. He was a cherub. His name means light bearer. Um, Usually, we see him as the serpent in the garden. He's named the enemy. We even see him be described as Leviathan. It describes that beast, that dragon, if you will. Um, but going back to that cow thing, that calf thing, there's also interesting verbiage in Genesis when it says he will be cursed above all cattle. Like, why cattle specifically? Just one of those other things that makes me wonder, like, oh, that's interesting. Um, and there's other named types of angels. There's watchers, which the book of Enoch, which is the extra biblical text, has a lot to say on the watchers for some reason. Um, and there's also ones that are called holy ones. Angels are also referred as stars or the elect. And we also see some that are referred to as beasts. So, and ministering spirits as well. Um, and that kind of goes into their duties in the tribulation, ministering to the nation of Israel. Normally, the angels are there to perform God's will, to protect Israel. Even some duties, uh, you could describe them as like reapers, like they'll take up Israel and move them in the time to come. But one part that I think a lot of people that go like study angelic activity and stuff always they always love to study these guys, and I think that's because there's more quote unquote evidence of them everywhere, especially in the Bible, and that's the fallen angels. The Bible describes them as the ones that sinned. The fallen angels are also called the sons of God in Genesis. You see them around the flood of Noah, and you'll see them, with throughout the Bible, Sodom and Gomorrah, and throughout the lands of the promised lands of the promised land. I keep saying lands. I don't know why, but you also see them prophesied in the times to come in the tribulation. You'll see fallen angels specifically with their offspring, the giants or the Nephilim. Uh, and there's so much out there. We mentioned Nephilim earlier. There's like so much interest and intrigue into the Nephilim. Like, I just watched a video today earlier, just because it showed up on my YouTube feed. It's like, oh yeah, there's the Nephilim again. So many people are obsessed with the Nephilim, um, but we see them, these fallen angels, the ones that sinned. They In Genesis 6, you see that they came down to earth, somehow in their physically manifested bodies, and they procreated with human women, with the sons of man, or the daughters of men, not the sons of men. Even though they do that as well, not procreate, but they do that as well, and like Sodom and Gomorrah. That's angelic activity there. It's not just uh, simple man. Uh, like just man, like human activity there. It's angelic activity there as well. um but with when the angel, the fallen angel, and a woman, they procreate, that produces giants, of course. I mean, on the human side, that produces giant. On the angel side, it actually, somehow they inherit death into themselves, so the angels actually die. Like, they actually inherit death, and I think that's Psalm 82. It says they die like men. So, like, some kind of transference of DNA or whatever you want, whatever can explain that, they inherit death through that. So there are these fallen angels. Peter talks about them being in chains of darkness. We can talk about Tartaru or Tartarus in the heart of the earth being the abyss where the fallen angels were put inn for leaving their first estate, as the Bible calls it. Um, and that's kind of like their place in the center of the earth, their place in hell for that. And you see Hades and Gehenna on either side of the abyss as well. But like, there's so much intrigue in those fallen, or not in the fallen angels themselves, but in those giants. The Bible calls them mighty men of renown, and this is a lot of times this is where we would assume that's where all the mythological legends might come from, gods, demigods, and maybe they had a big part in running the earth, running the show back then before the flood. Um, but we see throughout the Bible they have different names, and I think with these giants and these mighty men of renown, there might have been like a variation of them because the different names. There's the Rephaim, which are giants, which means giant basically. Nephilim means fallen ones. You see giants around Sodom and Gomorrah. Some interesting like Hebrew verbiage calls them the deceased, but I think it's translated into like other lords or something like that. But you see very interesting ones, like the Anakim. That means long necked. You see other ones that are translated into like terrible cave dwellers or the powerful, or just even the terrible. I think that would be like the Emins were terrible. And you see them coming out of uh, Bashan, like Og. I think that's where Goliath comes from. Everyone knows who Goliath is. Um, Og of Bashan and Og of Ashtaroth. And that kind of makes me think like, oh, maybe that's the bull of Bashan, like is related to Og. Um, but we see a bunch of those giants, and a lot of the people that love to look into this stuff, which I mean, I love looking into this stuff too. I just don't have the time and patience to actually do as much as they do. But you'll see just throughout the world, there's stories of giants, old artifacts and stories pertaining to giants, just as there is in almost every culture. You'll find a story of the flood. There's also giants involved too. So, um, I mean, you see them in, everywhere. The Odyssey, in Homer's Odyssey, you'll see like the Cyclops. And most of the time, these giants, even in the Bible, they're disfigured. They have something weird with them. They might have like extra toes and fingers, or just one eye, or like 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 the long necks and stuff like that. The Anakims. So just really a bunch of different. It's almost not really the heavenly realm. That's really the heavenly realm transcribed into the earthly realm.
Hmm.
So maybe that's a different story. But there's just a lot to be said for that, and people can go on for hours about this. I've gone through hours of sermons and studies just on the kings of the earth, these giants as well. So it's fascinating. And I think I see a lot of like people. Um, it almost brings up almost a conspiracy theory mindset when you look at these giants and stuff, because like, oh, they're hiding evidence of these giants, and like, I saw this thing, but like it's scrubbed from the internet and you can't find it anywhere. But there are really interesting things out there. It's like makes you scratch your head and it's like, wow, that's interesting. um, but a lot of with these, like with this kind of topic, it's hard for people, even Christians, to want to accept that this is like biblical facts, like, oh yeah, these giants on the earth, or even wow, these angelic beings. I don't know, I think they're just like all just like, oh,
Just
uh,
vague spirits
yeah, like,
somewhere.
oh, UFOs and ghosts, no, but angels are out there somewhere. But like, no, that's definitely not
Maybe
them.
out in
Even
the
like really
maybe in the
high
outfield.
named. Yeah, yeah, exactly. um like, even really high, well-known, like Bible apologetics will almost dismiss entirely the thought of like these extraterrestrial like ideas and stuff. Like, no, that's way too dangerous to talk about. We're just going to be comfortable saying Satan is the deceiver, and that's it. It's like, okay, but like, how is he deceiving? Well, he's just, he's getting into our system, and that's like all they want to. That's they're scared to touch the topic. But really, I think a lot of them, especially in the Christian uh, world, like they have their paradigm in one spot and they're not willing to shift it over to see another perspective and paradigm. Because it does, like looking at it from a biblical point of view, it sometimes is hard to swallow. And it's like, I don't want to really think of it like that because that would change everything for me. Like, I don't want to think that. Um, yeah, so there's definitely like a paradigm that you have to learn about and almost like shift your paradigm shift um, over to that way of thinking, especially when it comes to looking at what the Bible says about things.
Hmm.
Your paradigm really has to shift, and some people are just stuck. We always hear it described, or in the Bible, it talks about being uh, basically stuck according to man's tradition. And tradition is really a kind of a hard thing to get out of, especially if you're like trying to show people this kind of stuff, especially in Christendom. Um, like, hey, this is cool. It's like, no, nope, I'm not going to even think about that because what I was taught and what I was told growing up is this, and I'm not going to even think about that. So you just kind of have to be open minded and allow your paradigm to shift a little bit to so it doesn't seem as fantastical or magical as the Encanto song will say.
I haven't
I
seen that
have
song.
kids, so
Yeah, they're
I don't
just
even
like,
know where to
ooh,
go on.
we don't talk about angels.
Yeah, we don't talk. Yeah. Yes, yes. My microphone's falling. But there's one other thing that I kind of wanted to touch on really quick about angels is their their future. Um, right now, we know there's probably warring against the good angels and bad angels, basically, and what's going to happen to them all. We know the angels, the devil's going to bring a third of the angels down to the earth in the ages to come, and they're going to be basically kicked out of their seats that they have in the heavenly realm in the universe, like among the stars, basically. And we know that the body of Christ is given places and seats in the heavenly places, and we will reign and we will reign with Christ from there. So basically, like when you see, I think it's at the midpoint in the tribulation when angels are kicked out of heaven. That's basically when the body of Christ goes into the heavenlies and takes over those realms, and then or takes over those seats, and then the angels are basically stuck to earth, and then there's only one more level to go after that. After this is like the boss level, and then after that they get cast into the lake of fire. But right now the body of Christ is the Bible talks about how the angels are basically watching us, and it even like goes into some specifics about like, hey, do this because of the angels. Like, why would we do that because of the angels? Because they're watching us. And they're basically learning about the grace of God through the body of Christ, because this is something they didn't even know about because God kept it hid until he said, hey, Paul, guess what? Like, you're going to be an apostle for this specific thing. And it's all mystery. So I'm going to reveal it to you. And Paul's like, well, this is new. I don't want you guys to be ignorant of these mysteries. So I'm going to teach you about them. And even Peter's like, what Paul's teaching is like really hard to understand because that's not what we were taught. So the a lot of people always say like, oh yeah, my guardian angel is watching over me. I don't think that's really applicable these days. Maybe in the tribulation, because they will be ministering spirits to Israel, but right now they're real. I think they're really just watching and uh trying to see this whole picture of God's grace that's fully dispensed, and not just dispensed here and there, but fully dispensed, and the long suffering that goes along with that. And in the future, when when the end times come and everything comes to fruition, the body of Christ, the people that are saved in this age, are actually going to judge the angels. So we not only get the seats in the heavenlies and a position of power and authority with Christ, but we actually act on those and actively judge the angels. And maybe not like, oh yeah, you're good and you're bad, but like, hey, this needs to be done in order to fulfill God's will. Like, we'll be the judges for them, um, instead of, I don't even know if angels would be considered judges of men in the past or the future anyways, but yeah, we'll have a position over them. So that's hopefully the short edition of the spiritual and angelic realms for me.
So angel, so there isn't a guardian angel trying to speak to me through the digital clock on my microwave at
Oh, that's probably a
3:33 in
fallen
the
angel.
morning.
Yeah, that's definitely a fallen angel.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
it's a very strange topic, and we can go really in depth if we wanted to, but I'm not going to. Unless you had questions or anything you wanted to point out or say about that.
Wow. I think you covered it really. I mean, it's really interesting stuff, really interesting ideas, stuff that, you know, it surprises me at like the the detail of it, like how short and how tall they are, and all that.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, I
And
mean, I didn't even go into some of the other physical descriptions of them, but I mean, it's not. I kind of touched on them with like light and lightning and everything, but
yeah, so I guess there's a little bit of similarities actually in from your Christian standpoint and with Buddhism.
oh,
I say,
let me say this real quick. Like, not all Christianity will like come to this detail or like believe on this level of angels, especially when you get over to the more Catholic, like the Catholic ideas. I mean, they almost worship angels, which an angel specifically in the Bible said, "Don't worship me. Like, you're supposed to worship God." Um, so yeah, not like you won't find every Christian out there believing or thinking this along the same lines.
yeah,
Like,
that's why I said you're
yeah,
Christian.
exactly.
Uh, and because in Buddhism, in like the traditional framework of existence of the different levels of samsara, the cycle of suffering, um, there are kind of different levels, and uh, hell realm, animals, ghosts, which I touched on last episode, and human level, and then above that are like on a kind of hierarchy of like suffering, I guess. Above humans, the human realm are realms of what you could in modern vernacular call angels. Um, Sometimes they're referred to as god realms. I really don't ever hear them called angel realms, but you probably could. Um,
Hmm.
they're usually referred to as devas, as the deva realm. Devas are the gods. Um, which are not at all viewed in Buddhism as any, even like polytheistic religions would view it like gods. Oh, they're entities or forces behind, maybe creative forces behind aspects of nature. In Buddhism, there's a little bit of, there might be tree spirits or something. But these devas, these gods, are not ever really on a level of being considered like creators. They're
That's an
just,
interesting point because I was just thinking, oh yeah, the Bible does refer to angels as gods as well, but like it's
oh
not
yeah.
like, and you can, I like, oh, you're a monotheistic, you only believe in one God. Well, yeah, but I also believe there are other gods too, but it's like they don't have the nature of the creator, Jehovah God, Jesus. But yeah, that's an interesting point because they are called gods in the Bible as well.
Mm, yeah. And so I've talked about the different realms in Buddhism, like five or six, but there's actually technically 31 realms, and a lot of them are Deva realms. I mean, it kind of gets like weird how specific these uh, these realms are, but I mean, there's several Deva realms that are kind of, they're I from what I understand, they are thought to be like physical realms. And kind of above that, you get to like higher and higher, like, I don't know, they sometimes they're called like finer material realms, and at the very top are like are immaterial realms where beings are beings don't have a physical body, they're just like all mind. And those realms are usually uh they're like the realms of infinite space and realm of infinite consciousness. And um but so these Deva realms, uh and there's also, you also see uh Brahma come up in some of these Deva realms. And in one of the realms is where the most notable, I think, Deva you would see is the great Brahma, who is said to be uh, a Deva whose delusions lead him to think he's like the creator of the universe. Um, but it's interesting when you look at like the breakdown of these realms, because there are also let me backtrack a little because I don't want to jump into it a little like too without explanation. So when you're looking at the path of enlightenment, um, and this is kind of what I originally wanted to really focus on, because like angels, like there's angels in Buddhism, kind of, but they're very not that important. Like we don't care how tall they are or whatever. Um, but I was thinking like what would be a good comparison, I guess. And I started thinking about like the classical ideas of what like the Western world thinks of as angels, all those misconceptions. Oh, when if a good person dies, they become an angel. And in your Christianity, no. But in Buddhism, it's kind of yeah, you know? Um, because the framework of samsara isn't it trying to explain how the universe looks like, it just explains how the universe kind of works. So karma, the laws of cause and effect. Like if you generate good karma, like you will tend toward these deva realms in another life. Just as if you generate negative karma, you start tending towards animals or ghosts or hell realms. And a lot of the Buddhist teachings to the lay people of his time, because because the path to enlightenment is what is referred to as a gradual path. So there's like some of the really, starter lessons that he gave the lay people was how to be born into a better realm. Um, Not that that's the end goal, but that can be a goal, maybe even a stepping stone. And you really see this kind of played out to fruition when you look at the four stages of enlightenment. There's like the stream enterer who is classically said to, once you enter the stream to enlightenment, you will maybe be born like 7 times tops before reaching enlightenment. And then you have the once returner who will be reborn into the human realm at least once, but probably not just that one time, but only once in the human realm. And then so the question is, where's the once returner reborn after that? And the question arises when you look at the third stage, the non-returner, who is never going to return to the human realm, but they still have a few more rebirths to go. So where do they go? um and the answer is that in this framework, there are these deva realms that are usually called the pure abodes, and they're like, I think there's 5 of them, and it's usually said that the once returner and the non-returner and the stream enterer eventually will also be born into these pure abodes, where, from my understanding, it's a place that only once returners and non-returners get born into. No one else gets reborn into these realms, and there you can practice like perfect Dhamma practice, until you know all the other fetters, uh, being you in samsara, are released. Um, and the fetters are actually a good thing to touch on to
So
kind of
would
give.
so would like ascending into these higher planes like help help you like focus more on gaining enlightenment?
So, from my understanding, being reborn into the pure abodes, I think will, because they are said to be, from my understanding, like a place of where, like, you don't have what we all like experience in this realm, of existence, which
Hmm.
is, craving, aversion, like so many trappings that keep us tied into samsara. But
So maybe like so would it be like kind of reasonable to like try to attain rebirth into that realm in order to further your and like to get to enlightenment instead of like trying to reach it here or
I mean, yeah, I mean, there's actually whole schools of Buddhism, like the Pure Land Buddhism, which part of their like approach is that it's impossible to gain enlightenment in the human form. You have to
hmm,
first get to these pure lands, these pure abodes, and then from
hmm,
there you can like perfect your practice and fully relinquish all fetters until you are liberated.
hmm,
But other schools are like, nah, it's possible here too. Um, but
hmm.
I'm just gonna run real quick through the list of the 10 fetters, and that kind of it kind of explains how the four stages of enlightenment works as well. So there's like self identity, or like, like a belief in personality. Um, there's doubt, attachment to rules and rituals, sense, craving, ill will, craving for material existence, craving for immaterial existence, conceit, restlessness, and ignorance. And so I touched on the stream enterer, and the once returner. So it's said that the stream enterer and once returner both have let go of, I think it's the three first fetters. So the sense of self, or the belief in personality, doubt, and attachment to rituals. The and the only difference between the two are the once returner has significantly weakened craving, ill will, and delusion to a greater degree than the stream enterer. And the non returners, who are never going to be reborn into the human realm, have um obviously the non-returners are the ones reborn into the pure abodes because they're never returning to this realm. They also have weakened or relinquished the lower five fetters. So craving for material form, non-material form, conceit, restlessness, and ignorance, which, from my if I'm doing my math right, only leaves craving and ill will, which makes sense as to why those would be the last remaining ones, because that they are said to be the source of ignorance, of delusion, and subsequently suffering. But and the fourth stage of enlightenment is the arahant, who is an enlightened person who has destroyed all fetters and will never return to any plane of existence after this life. But um but yeah, so the non-returner and the once returner and the stream enter will be reborn into an angelic realm, the deva realms of the pure abodes. um there are many more different deva realms that are not the pure abodes. And it's important to remember that, like, it's not at all really the same as like maybe a monotheistic idea of being, of being like after death going, becoming an angel. Because in Buddhism, no realm of existence is permanent. So you are reborn as a deva, great. It's a life of bliss that might last for millions of eons, but you will still die. And usually you're reborn into a deva realm because of great, great positive merit that you've created, that you've cultivated, good karma. But you're kind of burning it all up in the deva realm. And so when you run out, you are subject to falling back into a lower state. um and one begs the question, like, this is pretty weird, pretty kind of out there and esoteric as far as like most of the other teachings of Buddhism. And I really had to fall back onto the last episode with the ghost realm, because it might be a product of the Buddha's time that there were all these realms described. And that's really what they are, descriptions. They're not like prescriptions of this is what must be believed, and this is it was just a way of describing how the world might work, um inconsequential to the path, really. um and really, like, Western Buddhists would probably say, oh yeah, it's a great analog for how the the law of cause and effect of karma might work. um to some extent, good, bad, but when you look at like the polycanon, just like there is a book of ghost stories, there is a book of angel stories called Vimanavatu. Um, and this it reads almost exactly like the Petavatu, the book of ghost stories, where you might learn about how someone was reborn into the Deva realms or the angelic mansions, and what they did to get there. And so maybe I'm too of a like agnostic Western minded, but it's like, oh, okay, these stories are saying good things will come to good actions. Um, be a good person and be reborn into an angelic realm. Um,
Earn your wings.
um, but like, but even the goal of being reborn into a Deva realm is pretty short-sighted from like the real goal of practice, which is liberation from the cyclical repetition of suffering. um
Hmm.
but I think it is really interesting how it's described that the stream enters and the once returners and non-returners have this like almost like a perfected place to be reborn into, to like just help loosen the last few fetters that are clinging.
Hmm.
um yeah, when the topic of angels came up, I was like, angels, yeah, but I almost wanted to like really focus on talking about arahants, because to me that's the arahant kind of has the same romanticism of like, oh, I'm gonna become an angel when I die. It's, oh, I'm like a perfected human being who has released you know all suffering and all causes of suffering, and can finally be can finally relinquish myself from that cycle. um and arahants is just a fancy Pali word that means, that is synonymous really with a Buddha, even though we only refer to, you know, Siddhartha Gautama as the Buddha of this time. Um, Arahants are simply enlightened ones, awakened ones, free from suffering. Other schools of Buddhism that do not strictly adhere to kind of an early Buddhist or Theravada kind of sense will also talk about bodhisattvas. And those are, I don't want to say synonymous, but they share a lot in common with our perceptions of maybe kind of guardian angels, because bodhisattvas are enlightened beings who have foregone their own liberation to help all sentient beings. And bodhisattvas are said to exist in one of these deva realms that I mentioned before, one of the dozen deva realms, before being reborn into their last human form, which is the human form that they take to help all sentient beings. Um,
So would they know that they're a bodhisattva?
yeah, I think they would.
Okay.
Yeah, would we know if they were?
That's
That's
like that's like some people will like, oh, this random mysterious biker came through our church and he just sat there and was like, wonder if that's an angel.
Yeah.
Like,
It's like, I wonder, if they're a
they get that
bodhisattva.
from, yeah, they get that from like the angel unaware kind of like appearing as strangers thing uh,
Oh yeah.
from Hebrews. But yeah, it's just my random question for that.
Yeah, I
Would
mean,
they know? Would we know? Would they
that's a
tell
good
us?
question too. Like, would
If, yeah.
like I think, would we even know if someone was enlightened? And a lot of people would say, yeah, of course. But maybe not. I don't honestly think we would, because even though a lot of the stories of the Buddha, it's like they looked upon him as like, oh my gosh, wow, something is special about this guy. But there are stories of the Buddha where someone comes to a one of the monasteries, and or maybe the Buddha comes through a village and it's like, what is this wanderer doing here? Who is this monastic, this mendicant, you know carrying a bowl and going about in his robes, like, who is this rando? And it's like, that is the awakened one. And they don't notice, they don't realize, they just see him as another monk. And
Mm.
it's happened, I think, stories within the sangha of monastics. Monastics from another place come, and it's like, okay, you're a monk, so what? And it's like,
Mm.
they don't recognize that. So I don't think we would recognize. I think maybe we would recognize an awakened person or a bodhisattva by we would recognize their actions and their intentions, but not their nature. I think, just like, people say the Dalai Lama is, like in the Mahayana traditions, they say the Dalai Lama is the incarnation of the Bodhisattva, Kuan Yin. This Bodhisattva of compassion, and that's really hard, for people to, like, to accept that, wow, this person is a Bodhisattva, this great being, enlightened being. But when you look at his actions, how he, first of all, how he affected the world positively, but also just like how compassionate he is in like every encounter he has and all that. Like, it's because that's what enlightened people are like. They're not like glowing and floating in the air. They're just nice people, like, to the core. um and very superficially, but yeah.
Interesting. Okay. That's
Yeah.
very interesting.
And then there's a question: would we know if we were enlightened?
I was wondering that too.
And we would. um but there's a lot of people out there who will say, I'm enlightened. And like, it's a pretty safe bet that they're not. uh
It's kind of
like,
like we don't know for sure who's saved besides ourselves. Like only you can know if you're saved. But sometimes you can look at someone's like, yeah, they're definitely not saved.
I think the best advice that I've heard is to treat everyone as if they are enlightened, or if they as they are a bodhisattva, because then your behavior to them can't do you or them any harm, you know and
Hmm.
like, it's not about, oh, are they actually enlightened? I better, like, if they're not, I'm gonna be really mad.
Yeah.
But more like, you know what, why not?
Right. Right. Yeah. It's like I'm not gonna make assumptions about anyone. Like me, if they're bearing the fruit of the seed that have, Okay, great. Like, but you know, in Christianity, there might be some people that act saved that aren't saved, and they just want to act the part. So yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna. I can't say whether or not someone is or not, but I can definitely look at their lives and see how it might have had an effect on them. And maybe they just are having a bad day or a year or something. Who knows?
Yeah, that's a really a good uh a really interesting, you know, comment that like, they might act saved, but they're not. And it's like whether or not they are or aren't, how you treat them won't change that. And the same with someone who's enlightened, like you treating them that they're enlightened or you treating them not like they are not enlightened won't change the fact if they are or not. Like
Right.
they very well could be, and nothing you can do will change that. And like at the end of the day, it's really kind of none of your business if they are or not, because in
Hmm.
the end, it's not a popularity contest. It's not like, oh man, they really got us good.
Yeah.
It's the result will follow whether or not we believe them or not.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hear this a lot from my pastor and other preachers. Like, when you get to heaven, you'll be surprised who's there and who's not. Because like you suspect on like, oh yeah, me like I'm definitely gonna see them, and like definitely not them. But then when you get there, it's like, oh, huh, where are they? Where are they?
Yeah,
So,
that's there's like stories I think from the Zen tradition where there's a group of monks and one of them is illiterate, not very bright, and just can't really grasp the teachings very well, and everyone's just like, wow, like he's so far away from where we are. And then the teacher will, you know, give them a broom and it's like, you know what, just sweep up, and that can be your practice. And so they just sweep. And in the Zen tradition, enlightenment comes in a lightning flash, like just like an instant, like almost spontaneously. It's not very gradual. It just happens when it happens. And so this person's sweeping, all of a sudden, bam, like is enlightened, and all the other students are just dumbfounded, like, oh wow, we were really wrong.
wow, interesting. How do they know he was enlightened?
I don't know.
Good question.
It's a story.
Like your question, do would we know? No. Would we know if we were enlightened?
We very much would know,
Yeah,
but
right. Okay, well, man, really interesting stuff. I don't think I'm gonna. I'm not gonna drag it on any further because I could, and I could make this a whole season if I wanted to. But um, we must move on. So, any other questions or comments on either end?
I don't know.
Like in your belief, how real are those realms? Just a short answer. You don't have to go too much into it, but
Um,
to you personally, I
to
guess.
me personally, uh, the reality of the realms is irrelevant.
I guess, yeah, I guess my question is not how real, but it's how real. I'm kidding.
Yeah,
Uh,
like I always think about this, like there's such depth to these stories of ghosts and devas and hell realms, and it's like, and a lot of Buddhists are like that's kind of not very Buddhist, especially in like Theravada circles or modern Western Buddhist circles where there's not a huge superstition,
Mhm.
and it's like, how does this fit in the Dhamma? And it all comes back to the the idea of karma of like good deeds don't necessarily get you into a god realm, but they do produce fruits that probably could compare to, you know,
Have
bliss
godliness.
of a god realm or something, and vice
Okay.
versa. Bad actions, and thoughts and intentions and stuff could produce fruit that might as well be a hell realm, you know.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna call it, and because we could go on forever, but I wanted to bring this up live, just to put the pressure on you. We're talking about these realms, and s- eh, I want to venture next episode into animals in the animal realm
Hmm.
because we kind of talked about that. So I'm just gonna make a natural transition.
Okay.
If you disagree, our fans will be disappointed because this is live and recorded. No, I'm kidding.
I guess I have no choice. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah. I do want to mention one question that our number one fan, Ulissa, um, posed to me the other day was if the if there are the fallen angels that are in hell in the hell realm. I mean, in their abyss. Not, I'm not trying to use Buddhist terms. The hell realm, in their abyss, because Peter talked about the fallen ones that were cast into the chains of darkness, basically. Um, are they able to move in and out of that into the earthly and heavenly realms? And we kind of discussed that off air, obviously. And no, they can't because they're bound in chains of darkness. Those ones specifically that sinned, the ones that sinned, are bound in chains. And people always think there are demons in hell poking you with pitchforks or torturing you, but that's not the case. They're being tortured themselves. They are seeing the torment that was prepared for them. So that's another misconception on the other side of that heavenly realm is Satan's not down there right now, and the fallen angels that are there right now aren't torturing anyone. They're bound there as well for their judgment, and they're reserved for judgment in the day of judgment as well, and they're going to get it probably worse than anyone else. Like Satan's probably going to get a worse punishment than anyone else. So
Hmm.
um, thanks for submitting that question, Ulissa.
That
um,
you describing, like, I don't know why it took me this long to like kind of do this comparison, but the fallen angels had fallen from an angelic state to a hell realm. And that's exactly what the devas do too. Once your life as a deva comes to an end, you naturally fall into lower states, maybe even hell realms you're if the karma is, just right.
well, one thing that kind of contrasts that is how the Bible describes that they left their first estate.
Mm.
Those angels left their first estate like willingly. Like they're like, we're gonna. Maybe they somehow abandoned like their heavenly realm nature to become that physical manifestation on the earth. And through that relationship, that's how they inherited that death. Like they die like men, and then obviously as judgment was poured out onto the earth by way of flood and they died, their what remained of them, their soul or their spirit, went into that abyss and that was reserved specifically for the angelic, uh, the angelic uh, punishment, the angelic part of that of hell in the center of the earth. So, um, I mean, definitely like leaving their first estate. You know, you do see a downward trend with those fallen angels and with the angels that are going to be judged in the future too, because they were cast out of their seats in the third heaven. Now they're now they're dwelling in the second and the first heaven, and eventually they're gonna just be bound to the first heaven, and then into hell and poured out into the lake of fire after that. So it just is a downward progression. And you kind of see that reverse with mankind. Like our souls are destined for hell, but as we get saved, we see an upward trend, a heavenly hope, and a heavenly promise as we get out of that. And you know, we're still, our flesh nature is still bound by sin, but we will see freedom from the sin nature as we get our new bodies and dwell in the heavenlies from there. So it's kind of different charts going up and down, different trends.
Yeah.
But guys, just like Ulissa, reach out to us. Let us know what you think. If you want to follow up on this topic, we will have another part if you guys want more discussion. We want to hear from you if you want to hear from us. Um, and
Don't think we won't come back to this topic.
we will, and I will be willing. But yeah, Baptist and Buddhist at gmail.com. Hit us up. You can hit our DMs, our inboxes, and our messages or whatever on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, all those places. Leave comments too, public comments. Just don't embarrass yourself.
Make memes of us. I know
Memes,
that's really uncool to
memes are good.
say.
Yeah, make us a meme, make us go viral. No, I'm kidding.
Please.
And you never know, maybe you'll get some cool stuff from us or something eventually. But you got to get in there. You got to, please. No.
Yeah, we need some Baptist and Buddhist swag.
Yes, we do. Desperately.
A Baptist
So,
and Buddhist
guys, send us
meme
some.
T-shirt.
Send us some. Just kidding. Send us baptism Buddhist swag. We give you permission to use our logo. Uh, well, anyways, I think that will do it for this episode. Um, man, good stuff. So interesting from both angles. And the comparison, I thought there was going to be less, but there are there's quite a few comparisons
Yeah.
and that can be made. So that was really cool. That was really cool to see. So I guess until next time, guys, do what you do. I don't know what I was going to say, but right now you have been listening to The Baptist
And the Buddhist.
with Mark,
And Brian.
and we will see you next time. Bye bye.